Hey guys, and welcome to this week's episode of the Top Producing Zone podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Shanne.
And I'm your co-host, Shane Carvalho.
So Shane and I are pretty excited, very excited and super happy. We have a fun guest today. Lina Ara, who is an agent in our network. So Lina's based down in Southern California. And she has a very interesting background that started in law where she was a badass civil litigation attorney and now is translating those skills in terms of negotiation, advocating for her clients, problem solving, dare I say, probably dealing with some tough personalities in the legal field. And she's taking all of that and translating it out into real estate. So Lina, we are super thrilled to have you on the podcast. We're very excited to dig in with you today on a couple of topics.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a long time coming, but I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be with the Wolf Pack.
And you're healthy. You're healthy.
Health is wealth. That's an old Vietnamese saying. So if you don't have health, that's it.
So Lina, I guess where I want to start with is digging in on kind of your career progression, right? So it is a very interesting transition. So you started in law. You kind of took the time, we were talking a little bit before we started this recording, you spent all those years, training yourself as a lawyer. Spent all those years in civil litigation, and now you're transitioning into real estate. So what kind of prompted you along this journey to make that move?
It's a good question. My career trajectory did not involve real estate at any point in time up until the last 10 years. I got into real estate as a real estate investor. So I started a family, bought my first home with my husband, and we started investing in real estate, trying to create generational wealth and buy and hold traditional real estate investing, and acquired multifamily units and continued with that, building our portfolio. And then most recent, I got into working with the general public. I had no idea what I was doing. Let's just put it that way. Even though I was a very experienced litigation attorney, there's so many aspects of real estate that is interesting. So you want to try and do everything. Because I didn't have a team to join. I only joined EXP for a year now, and December is my 1-year anniversary. And I was at a boutique brokerage prior to that for 8 years. And so, for me, working with the general public, I just did whatever came by and whatever was interesting, working with sellers, doing probate, working with buyers, just working with everybody and anybody. And so it was a bit confusing for me. And so my real estate career was up and down in terms of not having a clear and defined roadmap. And so through trial and error, I came into EXP and kind of defined really what was my why. Why am I in real estate? And I found that working with buyers and first-time home buyers, as well as people relocating to Los Angeles, was really of interest for me, and I look forward to it. And so I have niched down and narrowed down my real estate interests. And so now I see a lot of commonalities with law and in real estate too as well. First is negotiating. You're always negotiating with your clients, other agents, the vendors, lenders, escrow, title agents. So I used to do that too, as well as a litigation attorney, working collaboratively with everybody. You want to close a deal. So if you're antagonistic and hard to work with, the deal's not going to close and nobody's getting paid, right? So I definitely think if you can create a copacetic working relationship with your clients, agents, your vendors, this will help smooth the transaction to a point where, we have a happy closing. The next thing is real estate documents. These are legal binding documents. When you write an offer, it's signed by both parties and everybody involved. that is a legal document that can be scrutinized. It could be used, to go to court for litigation purposes and any disputes after closing. So, that is a big commonality that I saw with law and real estate.
So I mean, you've said a lot of things about your journey, which I want to dig into a little bit more. And I think starting off with, it's kind of interesting. It is kind of cool to see, like, you were saying, it sounds, you were doing real estate before, but it sounded like the breadth was there. Like you're kind of all over the place, but you didn't really go deep until you kind of settled in on now, these two couple of areas in terms of being a relocation expert, being an expert working with first time home buyers. Like what is it about these two areas that like ultimately you decided like excited you the most?
Right. So I am an immigrant. So I moved to Los Angeles over 20 years ago. It's been that long. But I lived in the east side of Los Angeles. Now I live in the west side, closer to the beaches, the Silicon Beach area. But for me, I remember that experience moving to a brand new city, not knowing anything, not knowing what cities are good, what schools are good. And it was a season in my life where I was single, didn't have, a family or a husband or children. So I could, basically live anywhere, and I was renting. So you can pick up and go easily. So you don't have to worry about selling your house. So 20 years ago, after, graduating from law school and figuring out what parts of LA worked for me and what didn't work for me, I actually stumbled upon the relocation services through relocation companies that reached out to me. And it was an EXP agent actually that found me on the EXP website. And he said, "Hey, I have a bunch of clients relocating for work in Santa Monica, and can you help us out and help them find housing?" And so I started with renters. I would help them find a rental, and there's not a lot of money in working with renters. However, when your yearly rent is $100,000 and you take a 6% commission, that's something, and it adds up if you have 10 or 20 clients. So for a first year realtor, it adds up, it stacks up. And so you do a couple of closings. But I find it interesting working with international clients, and I'm an international transplant, from outside of Los Angeles. And so I just gravitated, to these types of clients, and eventually they become first time home buyers. You have to obtain your social security card, bank account, all those things have to line up. And so it goes hand in hand. Eventually renters become buyers. And so you got to relocate first, figure out where you want to buy eventually. So I was excited to work with that type of clientele. When I got into real estate, people wanted me to work in probate. And I said, I don't want to deal with lawyers. I used to deal with lawyers all the time. Yeah, I don't want to be around lawyers anymore. Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult industry to be in, probate, because again, you're dealing with the probate court, family member dying, heirs fighting over the house and the money and the assets. And so when I was a litigation associate, it was that kind of environment. Everybody was fighting, and so it was very antagonistic, and I didn't want to be in that space. So I'm a buyer's agent. I love it. I write really good offers, and it comes easy for me, having to force myself to practice how to write an offer, and kind of analyzing different types of loans and things like that. It's exciting for me. I don't know. Some people don't like to sit down and read a real estate contract, but I do.
Well, and I think that gets to kind of like my next point, which is you kind of highlighted along the way, is it's really important to identify like your whys, right? Why are you doing this? What interests you the most? And for you, like you shared it, it sounds like definitely it's one of those things where you yourself immigrated here. You've been in those shoes, so to speak. You've walked through that journey already, right? And so it sounds to me like, like for you, like these are the types of clients that you gravitate towards because you can relate to them the most, and you kind of know what they're going through. And we all know home buying is no matter what kind of home you're buying, it's always it's a very emotional experience. It's a very for someone that's never done it before, or even heck, if you've done it before and you're on your second home, it's always a nerve-wracking experience.
Yeah,
right?
maybe you bought 7 years ago and you forgot how things have changed drastically. So you still can be considered a first-time home buyer in terms of, when you're working with a lender and qualifying for certain loan programs. So yes, I feel that I found a niche that really is relatable to my own personal experiences. And I like to share what's going on in my city. I put together a buyer's guide for Santa Monica, specifically for all my relocation clients. And this is just trying to help them settle and move in seamlessly as much as possible, because it is so stressful to have your home goods shipped over, your cat or dog fly with you, and your whole entire family, finding a new school, finding the right apartment to live in for the first year. And sometimes there might be a relocation package with a certain budget that the company is offering. So you have to work with those parameters too as well. And there's a deadline. You have to find housing, within a certain deadline, because they have to start work immediately. And if their corporate housing runs out, then they have nowhere to live. So we don't want to, displace anybody.
Well, and that gets, I think you brought up some other interesting points. That gets me into something you said earlier too, is like you eventually, now that you've settled into these niche areas, you also kind of built out a roadmap for yourself. You helped yourself get more organized in terms of what direction you want to take your business in. And I think it sounds like, like some of these elements are key in your roadmap too. Like you're talking about relocation. You're going to start off as a renter. You're going to come in here. You have certain packages with your companies, things that you have to consider. You've created guides for yourself. Talk a little bit more about that. Like when you were developing out your roadmap, like how did you go about doing it? What did you have to think about? And how has that kind of helped take your business to new levels now?
Well, you have to know your audience. And I was taught that in law school. If you're writing a paper for the judge, you're writing for a client, you have to know who you're speaking to. So I would put myself in my client's shoes and imagine that I just came here from, Europe, and I need to find a school for my child. And so what areas have the highest rating for schools? Safe neighborhoods, neighborhoods where you can go to restaurants and dining, or have access, to the freeway for commuting to work. So I created everything by myself. Unfortunately, I didn't have a sample or anything to look at, but I had, buyer's guides from, so many different resources from EXP, and I just gathered everything over time and just put it together on Canva, and I made it into a PDF, and I put, a bunch of relatable pictures from Santa Monica that I would take by myself, and I would put down a list of places to go for hospitals, for shopping, restaurants, local dining places. So things that everybody would ask me while I'm taking them on a tour of apartments. We were sitting in the car and we'll talk about it. And I'm like, well, you asked me that 3 times. I think I should put it in the guide and you can refer back to it. So I wrote a short one, a 10-page relocation guide, and I kind of tweaked it along the way, and, I used it for a year, and then it worked out great. And so I would create one for every city, for example, Santa Monica, Culver City, Mar Vista, Venice. And so all these cities are all West Side neighborhoods in Los Angeles. And so they have their little idiosyncrasies, and I think people appreciate that. It takes that extra step, for their spouses to take a look at, because maybe I'm not talking to their significant other until they arrive. And so this helps everybody to, be on a cohesive playing field in terms of understanding the relocation process, things to know about the city. So yeah, I really reinvented the wheel myself.
I mean, I think that's really cool. I think for a couple of things. Like one is if one takeaway I got from that was, if you're running your business and you find yourself, having to answer the same questions over and over and over again, to Lina's point, there's probably something there, and you probably should look to like replicate that in a way that makes it easier. So you're not answering the same question all over, like every single time with your clients, right? The other thing I think that's really cool, make a video. Exactly. I think the second thing that's kind of is cool is that I know you kind of said, oh, you like, you kind of have to do everything yourself, but I think that's actually really cool because as you're developing these guides, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just feel like, like you're putting your own spin, your own personality into these things, right? It makes it.
I mean, I will have to say I used a template. So I didn't really, make it from scratch. I just plugged in the pictures and typed it up myself. But I felt like, this is my work product. And I'm able to say I created this with the help of Canva. But, using AI, ChatGPT, you can be able to come up with, a guide, a city guide really quickly and be able to give that as a resource for your clients, especially relocation clients who don't know where the resources are to find out simple things like, where do I go buy furniture? Well, there's 20 different places, but they're not all good.
Yeah. Well, and that's the part where I think it's really cool because you have experience with that, your market, and it comes off that way. And so you brought it up. So I want to dig into this a little bit more too. Like using, obviously, I mean, we all have to use different tools. It helps us, right? We can't just do everything ourselves. So you mentioned Canva, you mentioned ChatGPT. Like how do you go about, you've obviously incorporated into your business in terms of these guides and your marketing, but what other tools have been effective for you that you've incorporated into your business to kind of help you grow and scale?
Google Drive. Like I am so not technologically savvy. I have like 10 different notebooks, and to my point of, my past habits of writing notes and little stickies everywhere. I used to do that a lot. And this year I have made a point to keep organized. And so I use Google Drive every day. I have folders. I have started, Google Sheets, and I open it up, and you can use it on your phone as well on the go. So I'll write some content ideas, write it down in the Google Drive or the notes, and then the reminders too as well. So I'm trying to go paperless this year, and it's worked out great because I will always have it with me because I have my phone. And so I just depend on the bare basics. I don't want to overwhelm myself because I know myself. If it's too complicated, I stop. Like completely stop, and then I need to take a little break. And so when I see like 10 different social media platforms or 10 different platforms to use to edit videos, I'm like, I'm going to stop right now, take a break, and then figure out what's the top 2 that I like to use. And there's something called the paradox of choice. I don't know if you've heard that, but when you come across so many decisions and it just overwhelms you and you're like, I'm going to stop. My brain shuts down. I cannot take on any more information. So I try to limit my choices by narrowing down what I have to use every day because I only have so much capacity every day in my head to remember everything. So I rely on my phone and obviously reminders. So, I try to keep organized that way. But what I would say to anybody who's trying to get organized is learn as much as possible about yourself. If you're not a tech person, then figure out how to be a tech person, how to educate yourself to learn how to use ChatGPT, learn how to use Canva, watch the tutorials, ask people, be resourceful for yourself and be an advocate for yourself. If you don't know something, figure it out by asking and take the first step, and it's okay.
I think what you were saying was like, there is just so many tools, so many resources, so many videos out there. And I do appreciate the fact that you're highlighting it is important to understand yourself, understand what you kind of gravitate to more, what works best for you, and then really focus in on those things and dive in deep. And I think that's where potentially a lot of agents, especially new agents, get in trouble is like, they see one thing, they see another thing, they see like 10,000 different things. They have no idea what to focus on.
You can waste a lot of money buying stuff that you may never use. You're like, oh, wow, but it's it's discounted. I better buy it now or else it's going to be full price later on. But you never open it and you never use it. So I admit, the first year in real estate, I spent money on things that I hardly ever used because maybe it was complicated. Maybe I didn't have time to learn the platform, or, I just didn't have time in general.
I was going to say now too, in the social media era, what's different from back when I started is that, since everybody's putting out all these tutorials and putting out all these videos and stuff, there's just so many strategies that get thrown at you. And so like you see, it's like the shiny object thing we talk about, where it's like, oh wait, this might be better. I might like this better. So it's like what you're saying, you're buying stuff you don't use, like you start going down a certain path and then you change your mind. It's a big distraction, honestly. But I do want to go back to what you said about like dancing to the music played, as far as like knowing your audience. That was the term I learned in sales. Remember you said about knowing your audience? When I had sales training way back in the day, it was called dancing to the music played. I was going to say, I loved hearing that from you because I don't really hear that often from people. So I just wanted to, show you how old I was and say dance to the music played. But go ahead, Michael.
Well, so I was going to say, Lina, like if, now that you've focused yourself, you've built out your business, right? If you were to reflect back and if you were to give, advice to new agents, right? What would be like, or even if you were to go back and talk to your past self, right? What are kind of like the top 3 or top 5, like pieces of advice you would give, to yourself starting off brand new in this business?
So the first thing is look at your finances. Real estate is a very, very expensive business. You have your licensing fees, monthly fees. If you're a listing agent, you have to put up a lot of money for marketing purposes, and the bills just add up. And so I had no idea until I got into real estate how much money you have to spend monthly just to be in business, right? But if you really think about it, say you open up a boba shop or a coffee shop, you're like, you know what? The first 6 months, I'm not making any money. I've saved $100,000. I am going to put this towards my business. So if I were to tell myself, when I got into real estate, I would have more of a savings account to, have money, to not have stress over having to pay the bills and the fees, and not having to kind of figure out, gosh, am I going to have to make a decision that kind of violates my ethics just to get a paycheck? A lot of agents come across that because they may be responsible for paying the mortgage and they may not have, money left over to pay for their real estate licenses. But gratefully, I was never in that position. But now I think about it, I'm like, I'm very grateful that I had enough savings to tie me over for a year and not make any money in my first year. But, definitely look at your finances. Can you afford to be in real estate and either have a part-time job, savings, or maybe work full-time and do real estate on the side until you're able to do it full time? So that goes back to the question, why are you doing it? Do you have funds to do it? Secondly, I would say there's a lot of time commitment in real estate. Coming from law to real estate, obviously there's a lot of commonalities, which we've talked about. However, there's a steep learning curve in terms of learning the business, learning the market, learning about yourself, and in a very fast, rapid pace in a short period. So if you're not able to discuss with your clients when you're sitting face to face and you have to keep saying to them, hey, let me get back to you, you can only say that so many times, right? And then they're going to be like, well, okay, when? When are you going to get back to me? So you got to know what you're selling. It goes back to the products and services that you're selling. Okay. The third one, I would say Rome was not built in a day. Give yourself grace. Give yourself patience to learn the business. Invest in yourself. Invest in your business, whether it be coaching, whether it be buying tutorials, going to masterminds to meet people, to help you, to network with people. So I started going to meetups. It was free. I didn't want to spend a lot of money. And so you can network with people on Zoom. Sometimes they'll send you a Zoom link and then, you meet somebody on that Zoom and, you put them in your CRM and continue to network. Yeah. And then the fourth thing would be to be resourceful and advocate for yourself. Be resilient. Always keep learning and ask questions, or else you're not going to survive in this business. It's very, very competitive. Even more so in California, Southern California. There's, you throw a rock and you hit a real estate agent, there's just so many. And it's very expensive to live in California, especially Los Angeles. So the higher cost of living, you got to make more money. How else, are you going to be able to survive?
Yeah. And it goes back to kind of what you were highlighting earlier is you really need a plan. You really need a roadmap. You have to understand your why and then be able to execute against that. So I think that's absolutely great advice. One thing I want to hit on with you is the networking part, because, we were talking about before we started recording, I was surprised to learn that you are actually an introvert. And so that's, I can only imagine, like myself also, I'm more introverted. We outnumber the one extrovert that's on this interview right now. But
engineer.
I can imagine engineer, possible engineer.
But I do want to say you can be successful and be an introvert. You don't.
Well, and that's what I want to head into.
Oh, totally.
Right? Because you have to go connect with people. You have to go to networking events. Like, how have you handled that? What's worked for you? That's helped you to be successful in that.
Well, I have, developed an ability to turn it off and turn it on, just like maybe an actor or a performer. Everybody has fears and performance anxiety, but when you're put on the spot, you're put on the spot. And so I remember my first day going to court representing a client. I had no idea where the courthouse was. I was so scared to talk to the judge. The judge told me to stand up instead of sit down. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I learned from that day on, if you're going to perform, you're going to perform. So you turn that light switch on pretty fast.
Yeah. Yep.
Sink or swim.
No, absolutely. I go back to my story. I always like to share. My first open house that I did, an experienced agent had me walking around a condo looking for an attic when there was a unit upstairs. And so I was just like, after that, I'm like, I'm never making that mistake again. And like, excuse the language, but it's like, to your point, you do learn pretty quick. You do learn very quickly.
You learn by doing, right? So if you're just watching and observing, you're not going to learn as quickly rather than doing it yourself. And so if you're thrown into the fire, sink or swim, that's it, So I think stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit will help. For me, it's more consistency. Being in real estate, there's fires every day you got to put out, right? So if you're got things on the calendar that you said, hey, I'm going to video and do 10, videos, make it realistic. I'm so sick of people saying, you know what, I'll put together 3 videos every 2 hours and like put it on every social media platform. It's not reasonable. You got to do what is you're capable of doing, and the goals have to be realistic, right? So if you say you're going to produce 1 video a week, great, let's do it. Give yourself a deadline. So if you're going to accomplish your goals, it has to have a deadline. Every goal has to have a deadline. I tell my children that too as well. You have 3 p.m. You got to do it right now. That's it.
No, I mean, it has to be reasonable. It has to be realistic, to be measurable. It has to be realistic, right?
Yeah, and manageable,
right? And manageable, exactly. And to your point, like, yeah, somebody might be doing 10 videos today, but they have to start somewhere. You have to think about, like, is it realistic for me to start at 10, or do I need to come up with a plan, start at 3 and then make my way up to 10, because there is a learning curve, but you got to just do it, learn, and keep building on that cycle.
Yeah. And it's exciting to do it that way, because you'll see when you first started, you're like, oh my gosh, look how far I've gone. I went from A to Z and it took time, but you see how you progressed. And with that, it's not perfection we're trying to reach, it's progress.
Well, so that leads me to probably one of my last questions for you is, if you think back, right, over this last year, everything that you've accomplished, right? What are you most proud of that you accomplished in your business? And then the second part of the question is, looking forward into 2024, what are you most excited about? I told you I might throw you some curveballs.
Well, we call it, that's a compound question. There's too many questions within a question, so I'll chunk it down for you here. So I would object. I would object to that. No, I'm just kidding. I love Judge Judy. She's awesome. Like if we just follow Judge Judy's advice on everything, everything will be good. So anyways, I remember meeting Shane last year. December is my first year with EXP. Prior to that, I had my license for 8 years. And I told Shane, I want to hit 6 figures. I want to launch a YouTube channel. I want to be able to find a niche that I'd be happy about, that I would be excited about every day. I hit all those 3 goals and I'm so excited. And for next year, definitely help out more families and relocation and focus on the first time home buyers, because I really feel that is a section of society that needs a lot of help in terms of educating them and helping them with the fears with interest rates, inventory issues, where to live once they start a family. I had those problems or challenges when I got into real estate as a first-time home buyer. I didn't know where to turn to because every agent did everything, buyer, seller, probate, investor. I'm like, I wanted to find somebody who could help me understand and be able to relate to that person and kind of niche down. So I want to help more families, individuals relocate and buy their first home in Los Angeles.
In real estate, it is very low barriers of entry, right? To get your license, to get into the business. Now, I mean, you could argue like there are higher barriers in terms of really being able to establish yourself, being able to plant your flag in certain areas, especially higher priced luxury markets, right? But it does get to like this interesting discussion of like, should they make it harder for real estate agents to get licensed, like they would for like you coming from law, like how much time and effort you have to get into get your your board, pass your boards, get your law license,
pass the bar,
right? Or like for doctors, like you have to do 4 years and you got to do residency, and if you want to like focus, you have to do even more.
Yeah.
I don't know. What's your thought on that?
I mean, law, being a lawyer, does take a lot of time and effort. I mean, obviously you go to college, you get your 40. This is the traditional route. If you go to college, you get your 4-year degree, and then you go to law school. That's 3 years. After that, you sit for the bar exam, and it could be a grueling 3-day exam. And you may pass the first time, you may pass the 10th time. In between that time, you're not really an attorney, but you can also work as a paralegal or, legal internship. But you're dealing with giving legal advice. It's so different than if you're going to help somebody buy a home and you have a transaction coordinator, you have escrow to help you out, you have title agents to help you out. You can also work on a team, and you're not legally giving any legal advice or anything like that. So I definitely think it's a tricky topic to get into, because some people get into real estate and they're just investors. They don't, help out the general public. They're there to, buy real estate for themselves, and create generational wealth. So I can't really say, if we should or should not, increase and have a higher barrier of entry. But I do think there should be more training in terms of ethics and integrity, and how to go about in dealing with clients and the general public. And so it saves a lot of time and effort for future disputes and litigation. Let's just put it that way.
Well, no, I agree, which has me thinking like, I feel like actually they should. I think they should. I don't know what the heightened requirements should be, but I think it should be required. Because,
well, let me ask you this. If somebody came to the U.S. barely speaking English and you say you need to pass an English exam in order to sell a house, you're eliminating a lot of people who want to get into real estate for the right reasons. So how are we going to keep those people out?
Well, I would agree with you. I mean, but I would say if they want to do real estate for the right reasons, they'll take the time to learn it, right? It's like when my dad came here to the States, like he wanted to come here, he wanted to bring us over here. He had to take like what is that exam called? English as a foreign language?
ESL. ESL classes?
Yeah. Well, there's like an official, well, he was already like post college. I think there's like English as a foreign language, like exam to be able to go like and do your MBA or your college degree or something like that. And he took it freaking 10 times.
Oh, wow.
Before he passed.
That's amazing.
So, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, it is. So to me, I would make that same argument. I would be like, hey, if you're coming here to the States, you want to get into real estate because, you know, it's draws to you, it's important to you. You really want to help people buy homes or help, you know, yourself buy a house. Like, you'll take the time to invest in yourself, invest in your education, learn English, learn how to do real estate, and you'll get into it.
That's resilience. If you have the resilience for that, you definitely.
And I really think they should put in more requirements because it'll weed out the people that just want to get into it because they see the glitz and the glam and they have no fucking idea what to do. And, you know, like you submit an offer, like you do, like in the Bay Area, you see a lot of these agents, they don't do a lot of transactions and they're super messy.
Yeah.
Like they submit an offer on behalf of their client and you end up having to like fix all their mistakes or they don't give you a professional offer. And so it's just, you know, it creates more headache to your point down the road for everybody that I do wonder like, you know, and personally, I think having now done real estate, being in real estate, doing transactions myself, like, there is skill involved in that, right? There's organization that's involved in that, being able to craft the right offer, being able to ask the right questions, have the right conversations. And it's, it's not an even skill set that applies to everybody out there. So it's one of the,
it comes with experience and it comes with work ethic, right? So maybe you're newly minted real estate agent and you've never closed a transaction. You never bought a home and you never took any of the free classes that is offered at, you know, your local realtor's office. I mean, how would you know how to write an offer? You know what? Go on YouTube, right? You do it wrong because you have to do a state specific. You can't just say, I'm going to write an offer and not understand where to pull it up, the forms. You know, there are certain boxes. If you don't check that box, the buyer does not get that washing machine or the dryer, you know, so those little nuances, someone has to walk you through it. And when I became a realtor, I never wrote an offer until 6 months into getting my license. And prior to that, I wrote an offer every day and practiced writing it. And I would have somebody review it and let me know what I did right, what I did wrong. And I was a 10-year practicing attorney. I mean, to sit down and write an offer and not know if it was right or wrong. So there's a lot of intricacies and language that you would put into the offer because once it's signed by all the parties, it's a real legal document. It's a real estate transaction.
And I think that just, I don't know. I just feel like we're making the case more and more for there to be higher requirements for agents to be able to get their license. Because I think like if you have to go through the requirements, you're more invested, right? It's like going to college and getting a degree. Like you're paying that much money, you're investing in something. And so you're committed to it and it's harder for you to back out. Versus I feel like a lot of agents these days, they'll sign up for it, right? And then, you know, if they don't pass the snuff after like half a year or a year, it's very easy for people to quit. And we see that, right? And then you have other agents out there who get their license and they're in it to, you know, but they'll severely discount their services, which also, you know, as a trend doesn't help anybody in the industry that much, right? You have these buyers agents out there significantly discounting their fees to like, you know, hey, I'll write you an offer for like $5,000 because they can, right? And so I just feel like, you know, if you have a higher requirement for agents to get their license, you'll have less agents out there. You'll probably have more qualified agents. And we also won't be seeing a lot of this crap in terms of agents, like discount agents, I think. Shane, welcome. We are having a very philosophical discussion on, you know, should we treat real estate agents and getting their license kind of like how, you know, we do with like a law degree or like being a lawyer or being a doctor, right?
I mean, look at a wholesaler. You don't even need a real estate license to be a wholesaler, and that's a real estate transaction. So I just think that once you increase the barrier for entry, you may be weeding out people who may not have the means to have that kind of training that requires, but to each their own.
Well, I mean, I'm always preaching this to Michael is that, these are salespeople that don't know their product, right? Like when we're talking about the people that are not doing well or that are brand new, let's say that haven't really learned about, how to build a house. Not that you have to know how to build a house, but you know what I mean? People that really haven't taken the time to learn everything about the product that they're selling, having a higher barrier of entry in my opinion, would mean learning more about, houses in general, the product that you're selling, as well as basically understanding to a certain extent lending and, to a certain extent, kind of understanding how, working with the county or the city or whatever, permitting, that kind of thing as well. I mean, I think those are all things that, should be knowledge that's required for entry, in my opinion.
And so I guess we'll end on this. So obviously for our audience out there that, wants to learn, connect with you, leverage your experience, your knowledge, building out your business, or even to contact you for their relocation needs or, first time home buying needs, especially in Southern California, what's the best way for folks out there to connect with you?
Right. So I am on LinkedIn, Lina Ara, and I'm also on Instagram, Lina_LA_Realtor, and also on the EXP website. I also have a YouTube channel, Living in Santa Monica.
Excellent. And we will provide the links to all of that in the podcast description so you can connect with Lina. And Lina, this was super fun. I loved having you on. It's
Thank you so much.
Conversation. Yeah, it was very nice talking with you. And we will catch everyone on the next episode of the Top Producing Zone podcast. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
See you soon.